Hi. Um, Today we're going to be reading chapter 10. And if you remember in chapter 9, how we left off was Coyote met someone named Lester at a truck stop. And she figured that this guy needed to get across the country over to the West Coast somehow. She just happened to hear him say that on the phone. And so she asked him if he had a driver's license. So she's got something up her sleeve. Let's find out. Chapter 10. I roused a distinctively grouchy Rodeo and poked him into a bleary stumble down the bus steps and into the dusky light of the parking lot with plenty of repeated promises like, I got someone you gotta meet, and it'll be worth it, I promise. Lester was waiting with his duffel at his feet, and his face got increasingly doubtful with each step Rodeo took down into the waking world. I'd made Rodeo pull on jeans and a t-shirt, but di- saying he looked halfway presentable would be more than halfway generous. Rodeo was still Rodeo, though, and he wasn't the type to be inhospitable. Howdy, he said, with a nod at Lester. Lester gave him an up and down look. Hi there, he replied. Rodeo rubbed at his face and then looked at me. So? What's up? I'm glad you asked, I began. This here's Lester. We're giving him a ride to Boise. Rodeo said, What? At the same moment that Lester said, Now, wait a minute. And I held a hand up to each of them and said, Easy, 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 fellas. I turned to Rodeo. With two drivers, we can get to the pork chop sandwich faster. And we got plenty of room, right? Rodeo shrugged and nodded. He was generally pretty laid back about giving folks a ride when they needed one. Exactly. Well, Lester here needs to get to Tammy and quick, and she just happens to be in Boise. He's in a pickle, and we can help. Who's Tammy? Rodeo asked. I waved my hand impatiently at him. You need a focus, Rodeo. This is important. Okay, Rodeo agreed with a dazed squint. Something else I had learned through the years is that just woke up Rodeo is crabby and irritable. But woke up Rodeo about 2 minutes ago, Rodeo gets pretty darn compliant. I was in the golden window of opportunity and I needed to close the deal. So we could use another driver and he needs a ride to Boise, which we just happened to be passing through. Hold up, Lester called in. I never agreed to. Oh, I know, I said, pivoting at Lester. Now you have both a desperate need to get to Tammy and a desperately empty wallet. Am I right? Lester sniffed and looked away, but nodded. All right. I know this crusty heap of ugly don't look like that prime of an option, I said, but it's the only option you really got. Easy on Jaeger now, Rodeo protested. She gets us where we need to be. I wasn't talking about Jaeger, Rodeo. I was talking about you. Ah, was how Rodeo said, and he scratched tiredly at his beard. Lester narrowed his eyes. Who said I don't have other options? I rolled my eyes at him, then looked around. There was an old guy shuffling along, walking his dog on the sidewalk at the other side of the parking lot. Hey! I shouted at him. The man stopped and looked over at us. Are you going to Boise? I hollered. The guy looked left, then right, then back at us. Me? He asked. Yeah, you going to Boise? The man looked both ways again, then cocked his head at me. No, he answered. That's what I figured, I called, and waved him goodbye. He shook his head and kept walking. I shrugged both palms at Lester and gave him an I told you so look. See, you got no other options for free rides to Boise. Lester looked at me, eyes wide and mouth open. And then Lester did something wonderful. He laughed. A big, deep, from down in your belly laugh. He shook his head and he laughed, and it was perfect because Lester's laugh was just like Rodeo's eyes. It invited you right in and set you at ease. I realized I was smiling without ever planning to, and a quick glance showed that Rodeo was smiling right along with. You're crazy, Lester said, still shaking his head. He wagged a finger at me. You are crazy. A little bit, I agreed, but all the best people are. I looked over at Rodeo. Go ahead, ask him the questions. Now, Lester is not the first person we've offered a ride to. Far from it. We'd given all sorts of folks all sorts of rides all over the place over the years. Traveling from gas station to gas station like we did, we often ran across wayward souls who needed some help. And Rodeo is the helping sort. He just is. But he don't let just anybody on board Jaeger with us. He always asks them the same 3 questions first, and they get a yes or a no based on their answers. For the record, I have no idea what the right or wrong answers are. But Rodeo seems to. Rodeo nodded and cleared his throat. He stepped closer to Lester. All right. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Lester. I'm Rodeo. This here is our home Jaeger. The worthless cat sleeping on the dashboard is Ivan. And that girl there, who talks more than she should and knows less than she lets on, is Coyote. Rodeo lowered his chin and looked slow into Lester's eyes. Lester looked back, and I saw it happen. Saw him fall into the kindness that he saw in Rodeo's eyes. Saw his whole body ease up a little. Are you interested in traveling with us for a ways? Lester smiled. He shook his head and laughed a little in his throat. Well, yeah, I guess I am more or less. Good. We're happy to have you. After you answer our questions. Ready? Lester shrugged and nodded. Okay. What is your favorite book? Lester answered without hesitation. Their eyes were watching God. Zora Neale Hurston. Rodeo smiled. Good answer. It was one of Rodeo's favorites. There was a tattered paperback of it on the bookshelf in the bus behind us. Okay. And what, Lester, is your favorite place on this planet Earth? Lester pursed his lips. His eyes wandered from Rodeo, drifted somewhere far away. A look came over his face, a thoughtful kind of look. A private sort of smile played across his lips, but soft and small. There's a beach, he said, and he sounded almost like he was talking to himself. In Georgia. We used to go there in the summers when I was a kid. Met my mama's family. We'd play all day in the water. Me and my cousins, my brother and sister. We'd play right through the sunset, splash in the dark. One year, there were fireworks. I don't think I ever saw my mama smile the way she smiled when we were there at the beach that summer. Never heard her laugh like she did there, like she was a kid again. There was a beat of stillness. Lester's eyes cleared and came back to Rodeo. There, that's my favorite place. Rodeo took a deep breath, held it, let it out slow through his nose. His voice, when he spoke, was a hoarse whisper. Last question, Lester. What, he said, is your favorite sandwich? Lester squinted at him. Then he answered just as quick and sure as he had answered the first question. The pulled pork sandwich at Starney's Barbecue in Greensboro, North Carolina. I smiled again. A pulled pork sandwich is a good answer to just about any question. I looked back at Rodeo. Rodeo's eyes were on me, his head to the side. I raised my eyebrows at him. Rodeo nodded once. Then all at once a smile broke across his face. Rodeo was like that. When he made up his mind, his face knew as soon as his brain did. Sometimes a little before, to be honest. Okay, he said to Lester, you just got yourself a ride. Lester sighed and shook his head, but then stooped and picked up his duffel bag. Rodeo's face darkened. Hold up. He eyed the duffel bag in Lester's hand. One last question. You got a snake in there? A snake? Lester exclaimed. We picked up a hitchhiker in Reno once who was carrying a big old duffel just like that, I explained to Lester. And, well, things got weird. Lester shot me a look, then looked back at Rodeo. No, man, I ain't got no snake in my bag. Rodeo smiled and yawned, and then pushed open the bus door. Welcome aboard, compadre. Make yourself at home and help yourself to the tomatoes. Lester shook his head again. I think he was seriously wondering what he was getting himself into, which was just one more sign that he was an insightful and perceptive sort of person. And then he threw his duffel over his shoulder and stepped towards our bus. What was that about a pork chop sandwich? He asked me. But I just shook my head and waved him inside and said, Long story, Lester. Welcome aboard. And that is how Lester joined our homeward journey. That was a great chapter. I can't wait to read chapter 11 tomorrow. Bye-bye.